Hi everyone, just a quick interval here to break up my conversation with Danielle, and just in case you were wondering, someone was really knocking on the door. I've got a rather lengthy conversation with Danielle today. It goes for about 30 minutes, so I'm going to put it in different parts. But as you can see, and it's important to note that I didn't actually give Danielle any warning whatsoever. That's how knowledgeable she is about this issue of digital media and politics. As you can see, she says plenty of interesting things, so I really don't want to cut out much of what we talked about at all. So just before I make a few quick announcements this week, thank you to the students so far in classes who've been discussing this topic of digital media and e-democracy and e-elections and citizen participation. We've had some really terrific, energetic debates, literally debates in some classes. We actually broke into groups and then refuted and rebutted the other team as we went along, and it's been fantastic. And what's also been really interesting is some of the international exchange students who are coming from Norway and Denmark and their perceptions of the Australian political process, and you can actually compare and contrast this and these different processes with the American political system. And so when you watch this conversation with Danielle, think about what are the similarities and differences. I think you'll find a lot of similarities in what she's saying, and Danielle's keeping a very balanced approach between looking at the positives of digital media and also the potential limitations and problems with it. So make sure you do watch all of the conversation. In class, we've been linking this topic on politics back to earlier topics on identity, thinking about how politicians are constructing their online personas, and thinking of David Marshall's earlier concept of exposure. Think about just what the 24/7 News Network and Kevin Rudd's selfies and that kind of thing is telling us about the intersection between personal and public life and the blurring of these kinds of boundaries. Also surveillance, which is always an incredibly important issue to pretty much everything we're talking about in this unit. The issue of data valence, all the political parties' collection of information regarding voters through various means, the tracking of social media and so on, is becoming increasingly important. So have a think about that. I'd love to see a lot of people tweeting links this week. No doubt you've seen lots of media articles and news reports on TV already talking about the impact of social media on this election process. It's only a couple of days away, and this is the very best time ever that you'll be studying this topic in this unit. So you're very fortunate that we're really in the middle of an election, a federal election, and we can look at all of these issues in practice. So make sure you keep up to date with things. And looking forward to next week, Tony Abbott's just given us the perfect segue from this topic to the next topic with recent announcements regarding curriculum in schools, in Australian schools, especially around history. And we're looking at the representation of history in museums next week, so that'll be a really interesting facet of this Module 2 discussion. That'll be the last topic for Module 2, and that's what your next individual exercise is on, your audio or video recording. So I strongly encourage you to choose a topic from one of the 4 weekly topics and an example quite soon and get started on that. We have the field trip coming up this weekend. It's not too late to register if you still can make it. Basically registrations are just for me to be able to separate people into groups, so we've still got some space. But make sure you let me know, and if anyone wants to bring a +1, as I said last week, a partner, a friend or a family member, they're more than welcome to, and they won't be charged the $10. Please make sure, as I've got noted in the document, you bring the $10 cash along just to help pay for the day, and you can also bring your lunch or a bit of money for lunch as well. I'll be talking about the various assessment pieces coming up at the end of that day, so you can get lots more details there. Also, well done to the groups that have submitted their 500-word proposal. There's some really interesting projects that are underway, and I strongly encourage you to move forward with them. Essentially, what this proposal was for is not to give a very lengthy, detailed feedback on these or a grade. They're not actually being sort of graded until we see the finalised project. I'm going to be sending out group emails over the next couple of days, giving very brief feedback on these. Essentially what that proposal was for was, number 1, just to get people started, and number 2, to confirm membership. So those people who have their names on the reports, who've submitted it and participated, move forward with the project, and anyone who is not part of the group and is wishing to continue the unit, please do get in touch with me via email. I know that there have been some participation issues, and as I've been stressing in class and also to people who've been contacting me by email, this is all part of the process of working with people. I do understand that these things can happen, but nonetheless, it's really something you learn from, and it's something that you'll be doing in the vast majority of industries that you want to work in the future. There are a number of safeguards in relation to participation. Make sure that you double check the instructions. I strongly encourage groups to reread the instructions for all the relevant parts as you move forward with the project in getting close to completing it, and have a look at the way in which you want to use the Deacon Cloud group discussion area, which is really a way not to discuss things generally, but to have a safeguard the process of participation. So that's about enough from us for now. I'm going to go take this dog into the sun while I leave you with my conversation with Danielle on digital media and politics. Enjoy. I was going to ask you about all sorts of things and you're already starting to talk about it. I'm glad you made that link back to surveillance. And what it made me think of is in terms of the debates and that issue of is substance being sort of turned aside in the face of aesthetics and entertainment and celebrity. Because I noticed with the debates, there's so many stories in the US media, and this is not particular, and I'm going to tell you, I can tell you lots of things about Australia that will make you feel better because we're going through the exact same things. We don't worry about the length of terms because, in the last 5 years, the polls, these constant polls, have largely been responsible for us changing prime ministers twice without even having an election. So, I mean, there's really interesting things. Exactly. So, but I mean, those debates with the constant focus on images and whether McCain points in a certain way at Obama, or if Obama's looking bored in the debates rather than what he's actually saying. Yep. I mean, that it's really That's linking right. back to the pervasiveness, the all-pervasiveness of the image, and how that's impacting on everything.
That's absolutely right. Well, I mean, it's interesting. At the first or second Obama debate, the one where he walked out and he looked tired already, I remember feeling a deep panic because it is so, those of us who follow politics, and it sounds like it's similar in Australia, you already know kind of what the terms are right now. Right now, we have to accept, whether we like it or not, that we want the prettier candidate, that we want the candidate who has the most polished speech, the one who's the rock star. And I remember when there was the first Obama election and McCain and Sarah Palin were getting really worried because he was going and having rock star receptions like in Germany. And so there are these commercials that are being made and and is that why, am I, an advocate for Obama's politics because he's a rock star? Well, no, but I'm damn glad that the politician that I like has such good aesthetics. I mean, it's because it's so deeply, it's so entrenched in what makes a good candidate a good candidate. I mean, in these days, too, when they're vetting who is allowed to run, so when each party is deciding whether they're going to support having a particular person on the ballot, and they're doing their vet and looking into their past, part of it is finding them somebody to getting them a new stylist, practicing speech with them, making sure that they get their children's social media personalities in order. I mean, it's a movie. It feels like watching a movie sometimes. And it's only a good movie when your politician is the one who is prettier, But when that shift starts to happen, then everybody's on the losing side of that sometimes, and I think at a certain point we're going to realize that all of us are on the losing side in the larger picture when that carries greater weight. It's always, in hiring, people who are more attractive, who meet, the certain expectation of beauty, get hired and get paid more. So there's a certain way in which this fits with the larger troubling sociocultural norms. That this is far beyond anything we've seen in, past politics or that we see in general culture, right? You're not being constantly evaluated. There's not a moment at which we would hope that you get hired next to another person. Well, they're making these two people compete. I might get hired, she might get hired. They're going to look at what I wear today and how she talks today. And, instead of looking at the substance of our work or what our long-term agenda is, I don't know. But yeah, you're pointing to something that is increasingly clear. And I think that the ability to consume and manipulate social media in strategic ways has become essential to that construction of what is a consumable, like kind of what you said, a picture, like the visual, the whole thing that we're supposed to be taking in and checking off because that's sort of more pleasing to the senses. So that the social media engagement really is sometimes about substance in interesting ways. So for example, if I go on, during the election, I went on to Mitt Romney's website and read a sort of what he posted as his main goals for the campaign. My parents couldn't do that in the 80s. There was no, they had to believe what their candidate said during the speech were his agendas, and they weren't taking notes. So there was no moment, if he won, where they could say, but wait, you said you gave these details about how you were going to do this. So it's exciting that we get to sort of put these detailed documents next to each other, and that the things that they believe, presumably, are memorialized in writing. So, if Obama says something, makes a sort of passing remark that he doesn't think necessarily is so important, but we think indicates something about his deeper values, we can listen to that. That's in writing. There's no getting rid of that. And the fact that all of that can inform these big picture decisions that we make, that is exciting. I mean, I think any voter likes having access to that sort of information. But it's when the information that we're receiving, when the media is being used not just to give us insight into these pieces that weren't available in the past, but the media is focused on the picture that we're supposed to see. So the polished image that it's about. So I think it's worth it because I like having the documented, the stuff on which to make these decisions, but I like to imagine myself as insightful enough to get past the pretty finish on everything. But of course, we're all consumers of culture. I watch the same terrible reality TV shows as most people do, and I'm certainly influenced by these pictures that I'm shown. There's a moment at which, I stop listening to what Obama says and think, wow, I really like the way he's saying that.